Hi, my name is Benedict. I'm going to do a quick run through. Kilphearts have released a Phase Plant 2, and there are some cool things about it. On the surface, it's easy to think, oh, well, why? They haven't done an awful lot. Well, to start with, Phase Plant have actually been really kind, and they give this update free to all their existing owners. Now, I got this from doing some kind work for them, and I thought, oh, well, I'm probably not going to get this. But guess what? I got it. So it's only fair that I have a look at it. Phase Plant, I will be honest and don't say I use a lot. I think I might use a little bit more now. I like some of what I see in here. Just because, nothing against the product fully, but just that, because I like it. I think it does an awful lot really, really well, especially within that whole sort of, buy everything in the kitchen sink box. I think that this is actually probably one of the best of that everything in one box kind of approach, outside of a door-like reason. Because it does work together and it provides solution to lots of possible problems. I think it's cool and it sounds good. This improves its ability to do things. So I'll run through a few presets that I've made, showing off some of the features, and as I notice other things that are changed, we'll give a little bit of attention to them. In no way am I saying that this covers absolutely everything that the version 2 will do at all. I'm also not going to touch on Snap Heap and Multipass, even though they have the same update, largely because they are iterations of what Phase Plant does. So let's have a dig in. First thing, and these are all just going in alphabetical order, not importance of feature or anything like that, is that we now have an audio follower. The obvious thing that we do with the audio followers is, well, follow the audio and then use it to create compression. So here's our sound. Listen to what happens. Kind of soft on the beginning in comparison. Punchy as well, quite punchy. So quite simply, it's following the audio input, and then we're using that to push this level down. Compression. It's got peak and RMS modes, gain so you can get the signal where you want it to be. If I want to be a little kinder or whatever, but it is likely to mess up with your signal balances and what have you. Attacks, releases, what have you. I was going for dramatic. We've got that real punch on the front of that. That is really rather cool. All of this is largely the same. Oh, if you want to add something new, I don't recall that you could do this before. You had to come down here. I don't remember whether there was the ability to start a new group as easily either. If you add something here, it automatically starts a new group, which is like a second parallel synthesizer. Before you have to enter or add your device here and drag it up. Now you can actually find the right point and add your device there. That's a little feature that is rather cool. Next, what's next? Ooh, double bounce brass. This is showing off primarily the curve. Now, when I did the official review, I did say, why no MSEG? And they came back and sort of said you can do it this way, but obviously they knew there was no MSEG. So I've drawn myself an MSEG here. We do have a delay going on. We can click. It is a little annoying having to click to open up, but I fully understand why it's not entirely editable in here. So we can set up then our shape of whatever we want, however we want it to be, with locking to grids and all kinds of things. We can even set up how it behaves, whether it's a one shot and done, an infinite, will just keep going round and round, or gets to a certain point and sustains, ping pong, or just goes backwards. So they're pretty cool. There's also, on a lot of new things, a trigger. So we can choose how we want it to trigger. It's a right click. We can decide automatically based on polyphony and what have you. What the rules are there, don't know. Seems to have a reasonable sense of what's happening. Never trigger from a note on, which is great for a free running LFO. You can see on the LFO here, it's free running. It's not waiting for me to press a note so it can trigger again. Always trigger from note on, so locking it every time there's a note on, it's going to trigger, which we don't need to put in this instance because it's automatically working it out right. Or trigger at the first note of a group of legato notes. So if I play, it's going to trigger once and not trigger for the secondary notes. That's commonly used for a paraphonic synthesizer, which is not so attractive these days, but if you are wanting to emulate a string synth, which of the Moogs is the Polymoog, I believe that's paraphonic as well. So the first note sets the envelopes, and after that, everything just follows where the envelope's settled. It's part of the sound. So the fact that you can control these things, quite cool. So we've got this little bounce, which might be annoying, but when we put it with the delay, something that I've always found a little annoying, and is no different here, but sort of just getting settled with it a little bit more, is that it's not immediately easy to do multiple layers of processing. But if you create an auxiliary and then send it to another envelope, and here this is kind of cool, if we sent the out from here, then what came here would be the same. But if we send the out from post filter, then the envelope here we can set to be slightly different. So the enveloping of the delayed sound is different from the main sound. So if we turn off lane 1, we're hearing a slightly different sound. A little bit more work than your average delay, but it allows you to finesse the sound that's going into your delay. So in this case, the main sound is going into lane 1, which shuttles itself to lane 3. The clone sound with the slightly different envelope is going to lane 2, which goes through a delay, which is at 100% because it's balancing with what lane 1 is hearing. Therefore, it's ascend. It's got its own chorus to match with what's happening in lane 1, but not the same. So the chorusing for the original sound and its echoes, its send echoes, is going to be different. Therefore, it's even richer, and then just a little bit of EQ to soften it up. I'm also using an LFO here to move the panning of the signal that's sent to lane 2, so you can hear that the delays are constantly moving around. And you've got the bounce of the echo, and you've got the bounce inside the envelope. So depending on, obviously, it's a tiny thing that people aren't going to necessarily consciously hear, but they'll just feel this extra little cool. I like it. Electric piano. There's a curve. This is the same as the MSEGI thing. I didn't draw anything fancy here, but it is available also in the sort of synth oscillator section. So I just set it up to be the equivalent of our ADSR. Running our global unison, we've got a bit of distortion, bit of compression, and then the disperser. Never really understood what disperser is or what it does, but it is managing the little attack here. Getting a little zappy. So interesting sound. That's how you can use your MSEG. Obviously very simply, it will replace the ADSR envelope. Flippy blippy. made a couple of these to show off. There's a new LFO, and that is a wavetable LFO. So it's exactly the same kind of wavetable as you're used to up in the oscillator section, the serum kind of mentality. So it will slide through different kinds of shapes. Now these are kind of relatively simple shapes, but it can slide through as weird or whatever as you want. Works on hertz. It's got the same triggering thing as everything else, phase, what have you, and then you use your frame. So this is frame is being modulated. Oh yeah, that's the thing we're going to look at. Being modulated by this. This is new. See how when I hover over a thing, let's say I want to use this LFO to modulate something, let's say the mix, I can see a little bit more clearly what's happening. And there's a little bit more information, and there's more information and more control here. You can assign to automation slots, which I didn't get into, but it's another layer of controlling controls. You can change the warp of these things. So that's saying that that curve's not going to come out exactly the same. So you can adjust your curves and what have you. So there's already that in there, and then you can have another curve, and it's obviously all going to get just a little bit interesting. This shows our plus and our minus, and we can change our amounts by changing the amounts here. So it's got a little bit more control than it did have before. Double clicking will make one go away. There's also this thing here called pitch track. It's tracking the audio that it's hearing. We can choose where it comes from. Sideband, lane 1, 2, 3, or master. So if we don't want to hear the delayed version, I don't think we can hear from here, but maybe there's the ability to send to sideband. Maybe that's what sideband is. There's nothing being sent there. We'll go with master for the moment. So it's tracking the pitch that it's hearing, and then we're able to send that back out to, well, in this case, the cutoff. So the combination of these moving, more complex LFOs affecting each other, and then taking, effectively hearing the audio and using that to modulate something, means that we can turn our humble into something a lot more interesting. That is nice. Overall, it's this combination of this, the better ability to see what's modulating things, and just somehow things feel a little classier. It's like they've sort of matured as coders and GUI people in between version 1 and 2. That makes this a lot nicer to use. I'm pretty sure the sample and hold was already there, but I may be wrong. The sample and hold is listening to this LFO and then just triggering it based on the same thing. Apparently it's also possible to trigger that from somewhere else. So I could have a second LFO that should be able to trigger when this samples what it's hearing. For the moment, it's just on a player note. So if you need a unit to sample and hold, I need a unit to sample and hold, then there now is one. An actual sample and holdy sort of a situation. Cool. There is a remap device. So we've got a, let's turn all of them off, and let's get these guys out of the game so we get a sense of how we build our sound. A not particularly charming sawtooth wave. Fair enough. It's going through a chorus, which is very fast. It's emulating a BBD kind of style. Goes into then a delay, which is modulated, but we haven't got the modulation on for the moment, and then a filter just to soften it up. We've got an LFO table. It's not really moving through its frames. I just said I want to have a less than perfect wave. It's going through a remapper, which means that as our LFO comes in, it's transitioning what you see here to what you see here. It's then being scaled, because if I scale here, we're only going to use this little bit. I want to use the whole throw of this, but there doesn't have a scale output here, and because I'm modulating the delay time, we need to have a very small amount of modulation. So I use a scaler, so outputting from here to here, and then turning the scale right down. It seems that you can actually separate that out and what have you as well. So now it's giving us a constantly evolving, moving modulation for our delay. So rather than sort of becoming, then it's constantly moving and changing. Yet sometimes this might be a little excessive for the situation, but it's going to stop our string sound from sort of disappearing through becoming predictable. Unmodulated delay. Modulated delay. So this is being used just to set the scan rate effectively. So modulating one LFO with another or with a remapper gives you quite interesting results. Really rather cool, numismatic kind of a string. So we've got our MSEG curve with a, well, plain ugly envelope shape. Another instance of a curve for modifying things, what's going where. So that one's going back to the rate of this envelope. This one's going up to the spread of the slight phase distortion. Because while that's kind of cool, it's not the same as standing in really bad weather, because it gets your ears and it screams. And this is changing the stereo spread of that because we're never perfectly onto the wind, so we tend to get this kind of thing. That was going to the cutoff, and there is one being sent, another curve being sent here, which changes the resonance, which is why sometimes it gets pingy. Because as the wind gets to the right frequency, it'll cause things to actually vibrate, to resonate, to oscillate. Bit of ring modulator, bit of the ensemble. This is all stuff that was there already. Reverb, and then just making sure it doesn't get too unruly. While Phase Plant has always been very good for building complex sounds like this, we take away all of the extra processing. We really don't have a lot. It was a little weak in the modulation department. That also means that, remember as I said, the Snap Heap and Multipass are also similarly going to be strengthened because they've now got exactly the same system as this, apparently. I haven't opened them yet, but that's what they say. No reason not to believe them. So for making really detailed sounds, the Phase Plant Snap Heap, the Kilphearts environment has really taken a big step forward. It's easier to go, oh, but these are just minor changes. Why can't they give me more oscillators that do more oscillating things? I'm not sure that we really need them as much as we did actually need this combination of better modulation, because I kept thinking, oh, there's better ways to do this. There are more things we could do here, so that's been solved, I think, pretty darn well as just some little sense that overall everything feels like it's tighter, more mature. Reason for any of its flaws has always had this wonderful sense of being able to put things down, and there's like, wow, that's so detailed, and what we can do with a seemingly undetailed device because there's so much thought behind it. This always felt just a tiny bit undercooked, but I didn't make much of that with the big review, simply because a lot of VST tend to feel a little undercooked, whereas now it feels like it's definitely al dente. And that's good, so it's going to transition it from being something that's a little bit like, yeah, there's so much potential here, but to something where I think it's probably going to get used a lot more. After my big review, I made a whole album just with this. Doesn't mean I'm going to turn around and make a whole other album with this, but just playing with sounds like this, I'm really thinking, wow, what I can do with that. Same with the flippy blippy, it's just... that would actually be harder to do in Reason, I think, than here. I'm not saying it's not doable. Where there's a will, there's a way, especially with something like Cron. But this is visual and pretty workable. That has its charms. No reason that shouldn't be doable in Reason, because we've got the really nice M-segs in Europa, grain, what have you, that we can fly out. But it's pretty cool here, and it does sound nice. There is a nice sound to the Phase Plant oscillators. I made a video a while ago comparing the sound of kind of the same patch made in Phase Plant and made in Europa. Phase Plant could be a little warm and mushy. This sound, I don't know whether it's changed at all. I don't recall seeing anything that says they've changed it, but it does sound really good, very controlled. And Europa could tend to be just a little too thin and bright. Put the two together, you get this really nice combination. But I feel like what I'm hearing here is possibly an evolution, but that may be me fooling myself. You are hearing the pure synth. There is no external saturation or anything going on in here. No reverbs or anything like that. So bottom line, if you have been interested in anything within the Kilphearts environment, Snap Heap Multipass and Phase Plant, but sort of felt a little bit like they're just a little undercooked, have another look. Ask them to reset your trial if that's an issue, because I think you're going to be pleasantly pleased and less perplexed, to continue the alliteration. The things with the Phase Plant, I got my P's lined up, have really come along very, very nicely. Have a great day.